Daniel's arms were twisted behind his back, the cold metal cuffs biting into his skin as two tall alien guards dragged him across the docking bay floor. The metallic clang of their boots echoed against the steel walls, making every worker in the shipyard stop and stare. Whispers filled the air like smoke, rumors spreading faster than Daniel could breathe. He tried to shout that there was a mistake, but one guard shoved his face forward, forcing him to stumble toward the main gate. Above them, the blinking red security lights painted the scene in flashing bursts, like a warning to everyone watching. The alien foreman, a bulky creature with deep ridges on his face, stood near the gate, arms folded. His voice was cold as ice. "You have been caught with the daughter of Overseer Vrax in a private chamber," he announced so everyone could hear. The words felt like a death sentence. Daniel's stomach twisted, his breath catching in his throat. It wasn't true. Not the way they were making it sound. But the looks on the workers' faces told him they didn't care about the truth. To them, a human caught with a high-born alien girl was as good as guilty. Through the crowd, Daniel saw her, Vera, the overseer's daughter. She stood perfectly still, her long silver hair catching the glow of the overhead lights. Her expression was unreadable, her bright eyes locked on him, without a hint of fear or shame. He searched her face for some sign, some silent message that she would speak up, but she didn't open her mouth. She simply turned her head slightly, as if distancing herself from the scene. That hurt more than the guard's grip on his arms. The gate slid open with a hiss, revealing a line of armored sentries. The guards shoved Daniel forward, and the cold night air bit at his skin. He could feel every pair of eyes following him, judging him, condemning him. His mind raced back to the moment everything went wrong. How he had been working late in the storage wing, looking for a replacement part, when he opened the wrong door. Vera had been there, standing by a console, her fingers dancing quickly over its surface. She looked startled to see him, but before either of them could speak, the alarms had gone off and the guards had burst in. Now, they marched him through the compound toward the holding cells. The alien city beyond the gates shimmered with neon signs and cold metallic towers, but Daniel barely saw it. His thoughts kept circling the same question. Why didn't she defend him? She could have said it was a misunderstanding. She could have stopped this before it began. Instead, she let them drag him away like a criminal. The cell was a dark, narrow room carved from gray stone with a single light strip flickering overhead. The smell of damp metal and old sweat filled the air. The guards shoved him inside and slammed the heavy door behind him. The sound of the lock engaging was final, like the closing of a coffin. Daniel leaned against the wall, catching his breath. His wrists throbbed where the cuffs had been, and the cold seeped into his bones. From the shadows in the corner, a voice spoke. "Humans don't last long in here." Daniel's head snapped up. An old alien with scarred skin and clouded eyes was sitting on the floor watching him. The old prisoner's voice was low, almost a growl. "You've been accused of touching a high-born female. That is not a crime here. It is an insult, and insults are answered with death." Daniel swallowed hard, the reality sinking in. "I didn't touch her," he said quickly, almost too quickly. The old alien only smiled in a way that made Daniel's skin crawl. "Doesn't matter. Truth is nothing here. Only the story matters, and the story they tell is the one that kills you." The hours crawled by. Daniel sat in the silence, hearing only the distant hum of the city and the occasional footsteps of guards outside. His mind replayed Vera's face over and over, that strange look in her eyes. Was it guilt? Was it warning? Or was it nothing at all? He hated that he couldn't tell. Late into the night, the sound of soft footsteps broke the stillness. Daniel's head jerked up, and his eyes widened when he saw her standing just outside the cell door. She was alone, her silver hair glinting in the dim light. For a long moment, they just stared at each other through the bars. Then she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "You were in the wrong place at the wrong time." Daniel stepped closer, gripping the cold metal between them. "Then tell them that. You can stop this." Her eyes shifted, scanning the hallway as if she feared someone might hear. "It's not that simple," she said quickly. "This isn't about you. You walked into something you shouldn't have seen, and now someone wants you gone." He opened his mouth to ask who, but she stepped back, shaking her head. "Stay alive," she whispered, and then she was gone, her footsteps fading into the darkness. Daniel stood there, his pulse pounding in his ears. He didn't know if she had just given him a warning or a goodbye. Either way, he now understood something he hadn't before. He wasn't in a cell because of an accident. Someone had planned this, and that meant the real danger hadn't even started yet. Daniel could not sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Vera's face again, the way she had appeared in the night and vanished without giving him the full truth. The old alien in the corner sat silently, his cloudy eyes half shut, as if he already knew what would happen next. The air in the cell was heavy, and the faint hum of the city outside only made Daniel feel more trapped. He pressed his back against the cold wall, trying to make sense of her words. Someone wants you gone. But who and why? The next morning, the guards came with food, 2 metal trays shoved through a slot in the door. The food was cold and gray, smelling faintly of oil. Daniel pushed it away, his stomach too tight to eat. The old alien grabbed his portion with a dry chuckle. "Eat while you can," he muttered between bites. "They may decide you won't live long enough to need another meal." Daniel ignored him, staring at the thin line of light under the door. Hours passed before the silence was broken by the sound of heavy boots in the hall. The door slid open, and a new guard stepped in, a younger alien with pale skin and sharp, glowing eyes. He looked at Daniel with a sneer. "The overseer will not hear your case. You will be tried by the council in 3 days. They have already decided your fate." Daniel's chest tightened. "I want to speak to Vera," he said firmly. The guard laughed, a cruel sound. The daughter of an overseer does not speak to criminals. The door slammed shut again, leaving Daniel with the old alien's quiet, knowing smile. By nightfall, the cell was cloaked in shadow again. Daniel sat with his back against the wall, wondering if Vera had lied to him just to keep him from shouting for help. His thoughts were interrupted by a faint sound, a soft scrape of metal on metal. He looked toward the door and saw a shadow slipping through the gap. She was there again. Vera stepped inside quickly, closing the door behind her. She wore a dark hood that hid most of her face, but he could see the gleam of her eyes in the dim light. "We don't have much time," she said, her voice urgent. "Listen to me. You were caught because someone followed me. They wanted to see who I would meet. You walked in at the wrong moment." Daniel frowned. "So this is about you, not me." "It's about both of us now," she replied sharply. "The ones who followed me are enemies of my father. They want him removed, and they're using this scandal to create chaos. If they can disgrace me, they can weaken him. And you," she hesitated, "you're just a tool to them. They don't care if you live or die." His jaw tightened. "Then tell the truth. End this." Her eyes flickered, and for a moment he thought she might agree. But then she shook her head. "If I tell the truth, they will know you saw me with something I shouldn't have had. That would make you even more dangerous to them." Daniel stepped closer, lowering his voice. "What did you have?" She glanced toward the old alien in the corner, who pretended to be asleep and didn't answer. "I can't say. Not yet. But you need to understand, they will try to make you disappear before the council meets. You must survive until then." He stared at her, frustration burning in his chest. "Why are you warning me? If I'm just a tool, why not let them kill me?" Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Because if they kill you, their plan moves faster. And if that happens, my father won't be the only one who loses. Every human in this colony will suffer." The weight of her words sank in, but before he could ask more, footsteps echoed in the hall. Vera's head snapped toward the door. She grabbed Daniel's wrist for just a second, her grip strong, almost desperate. "Stay alive," she whispered again, "no matter what you hear in the next few days." Then she slipped out, leaving the cell dark and silent once more. The old alien opened one eye and chuckled softly. "She's playing a dangerous game, that one. And she just dragged you into it deeper." Daniel turned away, his mind racing. He didn't know what game Vera was playing or what she had been carrying that night, but one thing was clear. He was no longer just an unlucky bystander. Someone out there had decided he needed to disappear, and the only person who seemed to care whether he lived or died was the same person who had put him in this mess. Sleep never came. Instead, Daniel sat in the darkness, every creak of the floor and echo of footsteps outside making his muscles tense. Somewhere beyond these walls, enemies were moving, plans were being made, and his life was a piece on their board. He didn't know if Vera was protecting him or using him. But he knew one thing for certain. He had to survive long enough to find out. The next day passed slowly, every hour stretching longer than the one before. Daniel sat on the hard bench, watching dust float in the narrow beam of light from the ceiling. The guards came and went, but no one spoke to him. The old alien in the corner dozed most of the time, his breathing slow and steady. Daniel's thoughts kept circling the same problem. If Vera's enemies wanted her father gone, why involve him at all? There had to be more to it than just bad timing. Late in the afternoon, the cell door opened, and a different guard ordered him to stand. Daniel was taken out into the open yard for the first time since his arrest. The air smelled faintly of burning fuel from the shipyard, and the metallic towers of the city rose like silent watchers around the prison walls. Other prisoners walked in circles, heads down, while armed guards kept a close eye on them. Daniel kept his gaze forward, but he could hear voices nearby. 2 alien workers leaning against the fence, talking in low tones. They didn't seem to notice he was listening. "The overseer doesn't know," one of them said. "The girl was followed for weeks. They were waiting for a chance to strike." The other one snorted. "And the human gave them the perfect chance. They'll let him rot here while they use the scandal to turn the council against her father." Daniel's pulse quickened. It wasn't just an accident, then. The whole thing had been planned long before he showed up in that room. But something still didn't make sense. If it was only about Vera's reputation, why not just spread lies? Why create a scene that dragged him into it? Unless he had been meant to see something. When the guards pushed him back into the cell, Daniel sat down heavily, his mind working fast. Vera's enemies had been watching her, following her every move. She had been doing something they wanted to stop, or maybe something they wanted to find. And the night he walked into that room, she had been working on something at that console. He tried to remember the details, her hands moving quickly, the faint glow of a small object on the table, the way she had looked startled when he entered. It hadn't been fear of him. It had been fear of being caught. That night, the prison was quieter than usual. Daniel lay awake, listening to the distant hum of the city. Then he heard soft footsteps stop just outside the cell. He looked up, expecting Vera again, but instead saw a thin, nervous-looking alien worker he recognized from the shipyard. The man slipped a folded scrap of paper through the bars before hurrying away without a word. Daniel unfolded it quickly. The handwriting was rough, but the message was clear. She hides what they want. If they find it, we are all finished. He stared at the note, the words burning into his mind. Whatever Vera had been doing in that room, whatever she had hidden, was dangerous enough that people were risking their lives to pass him warnings. He looked over at the old alien in the corner, but the man had his eyes closed again, pretending to sleep. The following morning, Daniel was taken to the workroom, a dull, echoing hall where prisoners repaired broken equipment. He kept his head down, but his ears open. At the far end of the hall, 2 officials stood near a locked cabinet, speaking in hushed voices. Their words carried just enough for him to catch fragments. "Data crystal," one said. "If it's real, it will ruin Vrax." Daniel's hands froze over the piece of machinery he was fixing. A data crystal. That had to be what Vera had been working with the night he found her. Something small, dangerous, and valuable enough to destroy her father's position. But if it could ruin her father, why would she be hiding it instead of destroying it? Before he could think more, one of the guards barked at him to keep working. He forced himself to move, but his mind was racing. The data crystal was the key to everything. The trap, the scandal, the enemies. And if those enemies got their hands on it, they could take over the colony. When he was returned to his cell, Daniel finally spoke to the old alien. "Do you know anything about a data crystal?" he asked quietly. The old man's eyes opened slowly, his gaze sharp despite the cloudy whiteness. "I know enough to tell you that if you've heard of it, you're already in trouble. The crystal holds proof that can shift power. Everyone wants it. No one wants witnesses." Daniel leaned closer. "And Vera has it." The old alien didn't answer directly, but the faint curl of his lips was enough. Daniel sat back, his heartbeat heavy in his chest. This wasn't just about survival anymore. If the crystal fell into the wrong hands, it wouldn't just be his life at risk. Something much bigger was at stake. As night fell, Daniel stared up at the flickering strip of light above him. Vera had kept her secret even when it meant leaving him accused and caged, but she had also warned him twice. That meant she wasn't ready to let him die. Not yet. And if she was hiding the crystal, maybe she needed him for more than just a distraction. The sound of distant alarms began to echo faintly from the city, pulling him from his thoughts. He didn't know what was happening out there, but he had the growing sense that time was running out for both of them. Daniel was pacing the small cell, his mind trapped in a loop of questions. The word data crystal kept replaying in his head. He knew what those devices were. Small, fragile-looking objects capable of holding an enormous amount of information. On Earth, they were used for navigation charts or trade records. But here, in the alien city, a data crystal could hold something far more dangerous. If it was enough to threaten Overseer Vrax's rule, then whatever was inside it could topple the entire power structure. The faint hiss of the cell door opening made him turn sharply. Vera stepped inside, moving quickly and quietly. She wore dark clothes this time, blending into the shadows, and her hood was pulled low over her silver hair. Her eyes met his, and for the first time, he thought he saw something close to guilt there. "We don't have long," she said. Her voice was low but urgent. "I need you to understand what's really happening." Daniel crossed his arms. "You mean you're finally going to tell me why I'm here instead of letting me die for your secret?" She flinched slightly at his tone, but didn't look away. "You were in that room because I needed a cover. I didn't expect the guards to arrive so quickly, but when you walked in, you distracted the ones who were watching me. I hid the crystal before they came in. That's why they made it look like we were together. It gave them the perfect reason to take you away." His anger flared. "So, I was just bait? You let them throw me in here knowing they might kill me?" "I didn't have a choice," she snapped back, her voice sharp. "If they had caught me with the crystal, they would have killed me on the spot. And the information it holds is more important than either of our lives." Daniel's fists clenched at his sides. "What's on it?" She hesitated, glancing toward the barred door, listening for footsteps. Then she stepped closer, her voice barely a whisper. "Proof. My father's second-in-command is planning a coup. He's been meeting with warlords from the outer colonies. If he succeeds, the humans here will be the first to be enslaved or executed. The crystal holds records of his deals, his promises, everything." Daniel stared at her, his anger shifting into something heavier. "And you're hiding it because you want to protect your father?" She shook her head. "I'm hiding it because I want to protect the colony. If the wrong side gets this, it's over for all of us. But I can't get it out of the city alone." He almost laughed. "So now you need my help? After letting them chain me up and call me a criminal?" Her jaw tightened. "If I told the truth from the start, they would have killed you faster. They think you're nothing but an embarrassment to my family name. That makes you low priority. It's the only reason you're still alive." Daniel took a step toward her, his voice cold. "Then tell the council. Clear my name and let me walk away." "I can't," she said, her eyes flashing with frustration. "If I tell the council, the second-in-command will know I have the crystal. He'll move before we can stop him. And you." She let out a slow breath. "You'd be dead before the hearing started." For a long moment, they stared at each other in silence. Daniel wanted to hate her, but the urgency in her voice made it hard to ignore the truth in her words. She wasn't lying about the danger. Vera took another step closer, her voice dropping even lower. "There's more. The guards who watch this cell? They're not all loyal to my father. Some work for him, the one planning the coup. If you stay here until the trial, you'll never make it to the courtroom alive. They'll kill you in your sleep and call it an accident." Daniel's pulse quickened. "Then what do you suggest?" Her eyes locked on his. "We get you out of here, and then we take the crystal somewhere safe, somewhere no one can get to it until we're ready to expose him." He searched her face, looking for signs of deception, but all he saw was the steady, determined gaze of someone who had already chosen her path. Before he could answer, the sound of footsteps echoed down the hall. Vera's head snapped toward the door. "I have to go," she whispered. "I'll come back when the way is clear. Be ready." She slipped out as quickly as she had come, leaving Daniel standing in the dim light, his thoughts tangled. She had admitted to using him, admitted to dragging him into her fight, but she had also just offered him a way out and a chance to stop something much bigger than himself. The old alien in the corner opened one eye, his expression unreadable. "Be careful, human," he said softly. "When someone says you're part of their plan, it means you're already deep enough that walking away will kill you faster than staying." Daniel sat back against the wall, his mind racing. The crystal, the coup, the enemies, and now an escape. He didn't know if he could trust Vera, but he knew one thing for certain. If he stayed in this cell, he was dead. And if he followed her, he might live long enough to find out the truth. The night was cold and silent when Daniel heard the faint click of the lock. He sat up instantly, his heart pounding. The door slid open just enough for a shadow to slip inside. It was Vera, her hood pulled low and a small device glowing faintly in her hand. She moved quickly to him, pressing the device into the control panel of his cuffs until they unlocked with a quiet snap. "Get up," she whispered. "We have to leave now." Daniel stood without asking questions, but his mind was spinning. "What about the guards?" "I bribed the ones on this floor," she said. "It won't hold for long. We need to move fast." She led him out into the hallway, her steps silent and sure. The old alien in the corner of his cell didn't even open his eyes as they passed, but Daniel felt the weight of his gaze following them. They slipped through a series of dim corridors, ducking into shadows whenever a patrol passed. The air smelled faintly of ozone and oil, and every distant sound made Daniel's muscles tense. They reached a service tunnel that led out toward the industrial sectors. The walls were lined with thick pipes, steam hissing softly from loose valves. "Where are we going?" Daniel asked in a low voice. "To get the crystal," Vera replied without looking back. "It's hidden outside the upper district. Too many eyes there now. If we can get it, we can leave the city before they realize you're gone." They moved through the tunnel until a faint glow appeared ahead. It opened into a cramped maintenance room where a narrow metal door led to the city streets. Vera pulled a thin mask from her cloak and handed it to him. "This will blur your face to any street cameras. Don't take it off." The door opened to the chaos of the lower sector, a maze of cramped alleys, neon signs flickering above food stalls, and the low hum of traders calling out their goods. The air was thick with the smell of fried meat and machine smoke. Daniel kept his head down, following closely behind her. As they weaved through the streets, Vera spoke quickly over her shoulder. "The coup leader has soldiers watching the upper district day and night. If they find the crystal before us, they'll destroy any record that ties them to the plot. We can't let that happen." Daniel felt the weight of her words sink in. This wasn't just about saving her father's position. It was about stopping an entire shift in power that could destroy lives, especially human ones. "Where exactly is it?" "In a place no one would think to look," she said. "But once we have it, we'll be hunted. You understand that?" He nodded. "I've been hunted since the moment they locked me up." They reached a quieter street, the buildings taller and cleaner here. A faint hum in the distance made Vera freeze. Daniel listened and caught it too, the rhythmic stomp of armored boots approaching. "Patrol," she whispered. "Move." They ducked into a side alley, slipping behind a row of stacked cargo crates. The soldiers passed by, their glowing visors scanning the area. Daniel held his breath until the sound faded. When they stepped back out, Vera quickened her pace. Soon they reached the edge of the district, where an abandoned transport garage sat in silence. She led him inside, weaving through dusty rows of old vehicles until they reached one covered in a heavy tarp. She pulled it away to reveal a small, battered cargo skimmer. Daniel frowned. "We're leaving in that?" "It's fast enough and quiet enough," she said, climbing into the pilot's seat. "Get in." The skimmer hummed to life, lifting slightly off the ground. They shot out of the garage and into the narrow streets, gliding between darkened buildings. The city lights fell away as they moved toward the outskirts. After nearly half an hour, they stopped at a lonely watchtower on the edge of the industrial wasteland. Vera jumped out and led him inside. The tower was old and crumbling, its interior dark except for the faint light of her wrist console. She knelt near a panel in the floor, pressing a sequence of commands until it slid open with a soft hiss. Inside the hidden compartment was a small black case. Vera lifted it carefully, her hands steady but her breathing quick. She placed it in Daniel's hands. That's it. The data crystal is inside. Daniel looked at the case, then at her. You're trusting me with this? She met his gaze. I have no choice. If something happens to me, you have to get it to someone who can stop the coup. Promise me. He hesitated, then nodded. I promise. A sudden sound shattered the moment, the sharp crack of metal against stone. Both of them spun toward the door just as it burst open. Armed figures in black armor poured inside, their weapons raised. Vera's eyes widened. Run? They bolted up the stairs, the case clutched tight in Daniel's hands. Energy bolts scorched the walls around them as they ran. They reached the roof, the cold wind whipping around them. The skimmer was parked just below, but there was no time to climb down. Vera pulled a small grapple from her belt, hooking it to the roof's edge and leaping over. Daniel followed without thinking, his feet hitting the skimmer hard enough to make it sway. He shoved the case into the compartment and jumped into the passenger seat. Vera fired up the skimmer, and it shot forward, weaving through the empty streets as the black-armored soldiers gave chase. Daniel's grip tightened on the seat. They had the crystal now, but they were far from safe. And he could feel that the real fight was only just beginning. The skimmer's engine screamed as it cut through the dark streets, its low hum shaking beneath Daniel's feet. Cold night air rushed past his face, carrying the sharp scent of metal and smoke. Behind them, the black-armored soldiers' hoverbikes closed in, their engines roaring like hunting beasts. Bright streaks of energy fire tore through the air, lighting up the walls as they sped past. Vera kept the skimmer low, weaving between narrow alleys and under low bridges. Hold on! She shouted over the noise. Daniel gripped the side rail, his other hand still clutching the case with the data crystal. Every muscle in his body was tight, the weight of their mission pressing down harder than the enemy fire. They burst out of the alley into a wider industrial street, the glow of molten vents casting long shadows. That's when a hoverbike shot out ahead of them, blocking the way. Its rider wore black armor marked with silver, the kind of marking Daniel had seen only once before on the shoulder of Vera's personal bodyguard. Vera's eyes narrowed. That's Rallic, she muttered. Before Daniel could ask, Rallic raised a shock rifle and fired. The skimmer jolted as sparks burst from its side. Vera swerved hard, trying to avoid another hit, but Rallic was fast, too fast. In a blur, his bike darted alongside them, and he leapt off, landing on the skimmer with a heavy thud. Daniel barely had time to react before Rallic lunged, grabbing the case. They struggled, both gripping it tightly. Daniel's knuckles burned as Rallic wrenched it away. With the crystal now in his grasp, Rallic stepped back, ready to jump off the skimmer. But Vera turned sharply, throwing him off balance. Rallic stumbled, but before he could fall, he struck her across the face with the back of his armored hand. The blow snapped her head to the side, blood running from her lip. Daniel moved without thinking, tackling Rallic against the railing. The two crashed against the side, the skimmer rocking dangerously as they fought. Rallic's strength was overwhelming. He slammed Daniel against the metal railing, forcing the air from his lungs. You don't understand what you're carrying, Rallic growled. This isn't about saving the Overseer. It's about survival. That crystal will doom all of us if it's released. Daniel gritted his teeth. Funny. That's exactly what your friends want me to believe. With a sudden surge of strength, Daniel shoved him back, but Rallic twisted away and leapt onto his hoverbike, landing with perfect balance. He sped off into the night, the data crystal secured to his side. Vera cursed under her breath and slammed her hand on the skimmer's controls. The vehicle jerked forward, chasing him through the winding industrial sector. Daniel's eyes stayed locked on Rallic, the frustration boiling in his chest. They had risked everything to get that crystal, and now it was gone. As they raced after him, Vera's voice was tight with anger. Rallic was my father's most trusted protector. I thought he would die before betraying us. I was wrong. Daniel looked at her. Why would he turn on you? Money? Power? She shook her head, her gaze fixed on the road ahead. Loyalty, just not to me. He's working for the coup's leader now. He must have been planted close to us months ago. The streets began to open into the outer edges of the city, where the factories thinned and the wasteland began. Here, the lights were fewer, and the shadows stretched long. Rallic's bike weaved between piles of scrap metal and rusted ships, trying to lose them. They gained on him slowly, but before they could close the gap, several more hoverbikes appeared from the shadows, falling in behind Rallick like a pack of wolves. Vera's jaw tightened. We can't fight them all in the open. We need cover. She veered sharply into a side canyon of twisted steel beams and broken transport containers. The narrow space made it harder for the enemy to flank them, but it also made every turn dangerous. Energy blasts ricocheted off the walls, sending showers of sparks over their heads. Daniel could feel his heart hammering. If we lose him now, we won't. She cut him off. But even she didn't sound certain. A sudden blast hit the skimmer's rear, and the vehicle shuddered violently. Warning lights flashed across the controls. We're losing power, Vera hissed. Hold on. She slammed the controls forward, pushing the skimmer to its limit. The engine screamed as they burst out of the canyon and into a wide, open plain beyond the city's edge. The ground here was uneven, scattered with jagged rock and deep craters. Rallick glanced over his shoulder, his visor glinting in the moonlight. He raised his rifle again, but before he could fire, Vera made a desperate move. She angled the skimmer hard to the left, cutting across his path. The maneuver forced Rallick to swerve, sending his bike skidding dangerously close to the edge of a deep ravine. For a moment, it looked like he might lose control, but he recovered and sped away into the darkness. The other riders followed him, their engines fading into the distance. Vera slowed the skimmer, breathing heavily. The chase was over. Daniel sat back, his fists clenched. We had it, Vera. We had it in our hands. Her gaze was fixed ahead, but there was a shadow in her expression. Rallick won't keep it for himself. He'll deliver it to the coup's leader as soon as possible. That means we know exactly where he's going. Daniel's eyes narrowed. Then we follow him. She nodded slowly. We follow him, but we have to be smart. He'll expect us to come after him, and next time, he won't make the mistake of letting us live. The cold wind swept over them as the skimmer turned back toward the city. The data crystal was gone. Their enemies were growing stronger, and the clock was ticking. Daniel knew the fight ahead would be harder than anything they had faced so far, but he also knew they had no choice. If they failed, the coup would succeed, and everything would be lost. The next 2 days were a blur of planning, hiding, and chasing small leads. Vera and Daniel stayed in the lower sectors, far from the council guards and the coup's patrols. Every move they made was careful, every conversation held in whispers. Daniel could feel the tension in the air, like a storm waiting to break. Vera was quiet most of the time, focused on tracking Rallick's movements. She had contacts in the city, spies, informants, and a few loyal guards who still served her father. Slowly, the pieces came together. Late on the second night, Vera returned to their hideout with news. Rallick is delivering the crystal tonight. He's meeting the coup leader at the Hall of Blades. Daniel frowned. Sounds friendly. It's not, she said flatly. It's an old dueling arena. They use it now for private meetings between warlords. Security will be heavy. If we go in head-on, we won't make it out alive. Then how? Daniel asked. We go in before he arrives, she replied. Hide in the shadows. When he comes to hand it over, we take it and run. It sounded simple when she said it, but Daniel knew nothing about this would be simple. Still, they didn't have a choice. If the crystal reached the coup leader, the plot would move forward, and Vera's warning about humans being the first victims would come true. They left the hideout just before midnight, dressed in dark clothes and carrying only what they needed. The Hall of Blades loomed ahead like a giant scar in the city's skyline, its jagged spires cutting into the sky. Inside, the place was lit by hanging lanterns that swayed slightly in the draft. The air smelled of dust and old blood. Vera led him through narrow hallways until they reached the main arena. The stone floor was cracked and stained from centuries of battles. Above, empty seats circled the space like silent watchers. They moved to the shadows behind a collapsed section of wall, crouching low. Minutes passed like hours. Daniel's heartbeat was loud in his ears. Then the sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the arena. Rallick entered, walking with the confident stride of someone who knew he was safe. In his hand was the black case containing the data crystal. Another figure stepped out from the opposite side, a tall alien with dark armor and a cruel smile. Even from a distance, Daniel could feel the man's presence like a weight pressing down. This had to be the coup leader. You have it? the leader asked. Rallick held the case out. As promised. With this, you control the city. Daniel tensed, ready to move, but Vera put a hand on his arm, signaling him to wait. The leader opened the case, checking the crystal. For a moment, his expression was pure satisfaction. That's when Vera moved. She burst from the shadows, her movements sharp and fast. Daniel followed, sprinting toward them before the guards could react. Rallick's eyes widened in shock as Vera slammed into him, knocking him back. Daniel grabbed the case from the leader's hands, clutching it tight. The coup leader roared in anger, drawing a curved blade from his side. Guards rushed in from all sides, weapons ready. Daniel ducked as an energy bolt shot past his head, the heat scorching the air. Go! Vera shouted, blocking a guard's strike with her forearm and countering with a swift kick. Daniel ran toward the far exit, weaving through the chaos. Behind him, the clash of metal and the shouts of fighters filled the arena. He could hear Vera's voice, sharp and commanding, as she fought to keep the path clear. Just as he reached the exit, Rallick appeared in front of him, his shock rifle raised. You're not leaving with that, he growled. Daniel's mind raced. He couldn't outshoot Rallick, but he could outthink him. He tossed the case high into the air. Rallick's eyes followed it instinctively, and in that split second, Daniel lunged forward, slamming his shoulder into Rallick's chest. The blow knocked them both to the ground, but Daniel was quicker. He rolled away, grabbed the case, and sprinted for the door. Vera appeared beside him a moment later, blood on her lip, but a determined glint in her eyes. This way, she barked. They raced through the twisting corridors, the sound of pursuit close behind. Every turn felt like it would lead to a dead end, but Vera seemed to know the layout by heart. Finally, they burst out into the cold night air. The skimmer was waiting nearby, hidden under a sheet of camouflage netting. Daniel jumped into the passenger seat while Vera fired up the engine. The skimmer roared to life, shooting forward into the darkness. Behind them, shouts and weapons fire echoed, but no one was close enough to follow. When the city lights were far behind, Vera slowed the skimmer and looked at him. We did it, she said, her voice steady but tired. Daniel looked down at the case in his lap. So what now? We give it to your father? Her eyes met his, and for a long moment she didn't answer. Then she said, Not yet. If we hand it over too soon, the coup leader will know we've stopped him, and he'll try again. We need to make sure every council member sees this at the same time. No secrets. No chance for him to hide. Daniel nodded slowly. And until then? Until then, she said with a faint smile, you stay close to me. I still can't trust anyone else. The wind whipped past them as the skimmer carried them into the night. The danger wasn't over, not by a long shot, but for the first time since his arrest, Daniel felt something close to hope. He had been dragged into a world of lies and betrayal, but now he was part of something bigger than just survival. And as long as he and Vera stood together, maybe, just maybe, they had a chance to win.